When I first saw this radio behind me, which is the Yaesu FT-710 AESS, I thought it was a cut-down version of the FT-10. I was totally wrong. It's a completely new design. And I must say the performance staggered me. On the receive side, it's very near the top of the Sherwood Engineering ratings. Gracious me. Anyway, let me tell you a bit more about it. Let me show you how I installed this radio. I took advantage of the fact that it's got an external video output, so I mounted a screen. I think it's about a 12 or 13 inch screen on the top there, and that makes a tremendous difference, because if you're like me and you're getting towards the point where your eyesight is not as good as you would have hoped, it's a massive advantage. And I also hooked it up to my ACOM amplifier so I could test it out with an amplifier, and I purchased on eBay the necessary lead to connect the 710 to the ACOM amplifier. It's a very smart yet compact transceiver, and I've shown the dimensions below the picture here. And if you've got a small amount of desk space, you'll have no problems in accommodating it. It fits in very easily. The transceiver comes with a matching speaker, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You can clip it onto the side of the radio, and they give you the necessary parts to clip it onto the side of the radio, but in this case I chose to mount it separately because it suited my layout. In this video I'm featuring the AESS version. There is a field version which is absolutely identical to this, minus the external speaker, but it does have a carrying handle. If you want to enjoy AESS at a later date, then purchase the optional speaker. Now let's talk a little bit about the FT-710 concept, because it's actually Yaesu's very first fully SDR HF transceiver, believe it or not. The FT-101 and the FT-10 use superhet front ends. So it's quite an innovative design for Yaesu, in as much as it's their very first SDR transceiver. And I said right at the beginning that I had always thought the FT-710 was a cut-down version of the FT-10, but actually it's a new design. And I have to say that when I switched this radio on, I was absolutely amazed at the quality of the audio coming out the speaker. You know, when you've been in ham radio for as many years as I have, when you turn on a radio, it doesn't take you more than a couple of minutes to sort of make a brief assessment on it. And when I switched this on, I was really amazed at the quality of the audio. The quality of the audio coming out the speaker and the performance of the receiver on my initial tests was quite amazing. I couldn't believe that I was effectively listening to a budget class transceiver, or budget class in price, but I hesitate to call it budget in terms of its performance, particularly as it's so high up the Sherwood Engineering performance table. Now let's have a look at the Sherwood Engineering rating list. Bear in mind that this list includes both current and discontinued transceivers. So at the top is the FT-101MP, which means to say it's an all-time best performer, and that sells at £4,199. The Flex 6700, a lot more expensive at £7,249. Then third in the list is the FT-10, which is very competitively priced at £1,299. And then joint fourth place is the FT-710 models, because both models internally are basically the same. And they are fourth, and you can pick one up if you have the field one for £899. Do we call the FT-710 budget transceivers? Certainly not in performance, but perhaps price-wise. And remember, even at this price, the FT-710 gives you 4 metres as well as the 6 metre band, so it's a nice little bonus, isn't it? Let's take a look at how AESS works. You've got 2 speakers. You've got the external speaker and you've got the internal speaker. Basically, this speaker takes the higher frequencies Now, with higher frequencies, they are directional, so it's quite important really that you have a forward-facing speaker for the higher frequencies, which is what we've got here. For the lower frequencies, lower audio frequencies tend to be non-directional. So whether that speaker in the top there is facing upwards or forwards doesn't really matter that much. It's the higher frequencies are directional. With the AESS off, all the frequencies or all the audio is fed from this speaker, so you get a predominantly high frequency response from this speaker. As you apply AESS, it increases the amount of audio that comes out of this speaker, and this speaker tends to be predominantly low frequency when this external speaker is plugged in. There's also a menu item at which you can change the frequency at which this speaker accepts frequencies. The default is 700 Hz, so everything over 700 Hz comes through this speaker. You can switch it up to 1000 Hz, and they say switch it up to 1000 Hz if you've got a high volume level. But basically, I found that 700 Hz, the default position, is right. So we leave that filter at 700 Hz, and that means to say all audio frequencies above 700 Hz comes through there, and audio below 700 Hz comes from this speaker, and we can progressively increase the amount of the low frequencies coming out of this speaker. So let me see if I can demonstrate it to you. I switched to the larger display so that you can see a bit better. I press this button here. You see all the menu items there. That basically is the AESS control, and that simply is a filter which switches between 700 or 1000. So let me see if I can demonstrate now how this sounds. It's always difficult to demonstrate audio on a recording because it's a lot different from the live experience. Anyway, let's give it a go. We've now got the AESS off, and I'm going to bring it up now.
I'm just running 60, 70 watts.
You should hear, you should hear the audio coming up. It's more fully sounding audio.
As I said, when we first spoke, I just literally threw a...
And I'll now take it down again.
With PA mics and stuff over the years, but of course this is an electret, which I'm not used to. I'm more used to using dynamic mics, so it's all new to me from that side, and it's people like yourself that help me get the audio.
Now I don't know whether you could hear the difference. Hopefully you can hear some sort of difference, but that gives you some idea of how useful that control is, and it's actually very useful. If you've got a hearing problem, I can imagine it would benefit you. It certainly makes the listening experience quite pleasant actually, and you can adjust it to suit your own personal experience and of course band conditions. So what happens if you want to go out portable and unplug the external speaker? Well, basically the transceiver acts as a normal transceiver. The AESS is disabled, and all the audio comes out quite normally from the internal speaker. Now, I think we're all guilty when we get a new radio of wanting to switch it on and operate it without even bothering to open the manual. Well, the good news is with the FT-710 you can actually make quite a lot of headway before you have to open the manual. It's got an excellent menu system. Let's take a look at the controls clustered around the main tuning dial. Top left, you've got the button to enter memory information, then you can switch between VFO and memory, then you've got the A and B VFO, then you've got the band switch. Quickly press that and you can select the band. Quick Memory Bank allows you to put a frequency into one of 5 of the banks for quick recall of a particular channel, and the function button you'll use extensively for bringing up and navigating menu items. It's very easy to bring up the menu system, one button press here, and basically you've got the complete menu system on the screen. I find for base operation the external display is very beneficial. It's nice to have all the menu items up on one display, and these menu items here in blue, you press those and you bring up some additional menus. Moving on, we've got the digital noise reduction button, and I'll demonstrate this a bit later. And then on the other side you've got the wide and narrow filter button, which enables you to select wide and narrow, but those 2 positions can be user programmed. Then if you go further down on the bottom left, we've got this control here, which basically controls the actual DSP settings for the bandwidth and filtering. It will also switch through the memory channels and fixed frequency programmable steps. And then finally at the bottom you've got the DSP reset button and the fine tuning switch. With these smaller radios you tend to run out of space on the front panel for buttons, so they've resorted to a row of buttons on the top panel. Let me just quickly run through those for you. You've got the mode button, the automatic CW 0 beat button, split frequency, clarifier, which is RIT, and then the noise blanker button. The changes you can make to the transmit audio are quite comprehensive actually. You've of course got a mic gain control, you've got a compression control, but you've also got a 3-band equalizer, and it's very comprehensive actually, because you can adjust the bass, mid-range and treble, but each of those bands you can adjust the width of the adjustment and also the depth of course. I'll put up on the screen now basically what you can do with that EQ control. It's very comprehensive, and the best way to adjust it really is by listening to your transmission in the headphones. But if you switch the monitor on, you can actually, without transmitting, you can actually listen to the audio. Just turn your transmit down to 0, and then you can try fiddling about with the EQ. But it's very, very comprehensive, particularly for a radio of this price level. So what about the receiver section itself? That's a key feature for any transceiver, isn't it? So let's take a look at that. A critical part of any receiver is the front end, and the FT-710 has been well designed. You've got an attenuator here which can be switched in 3 levels. You can get 6 dB, 12 dB and 18 dB attenuation. IPO, intercept point optimization. In this setting, the front end amplifiers are completely bypassed so that the signal goes straight through to essentially the mixing area. It's the optimum situation on front end of this receiver because it gives the best performance, and certainly on 160, 80, 40 and even 20 that setting is more than enough. If you go into the higher bands, then you will need to switch probably the amp onto the first position, which is 10 dB gain, and the second position, if you're on perhaps 6 meters and 70 megahertz, then you might need the second position in, which is 20 dB of gain. I often find on 40 meters particularly that even with the amplifier switched off in the IPO position, you sometimes need to switch in a bit of extra attenuation. So you just touch the front panel there and you can change the attenuation to whatever you like. We go down to 12 dB and so forth. Let's take that back to 0 and we go to the IPO. We can set the amplifier to 10 dB of gain and you see the signals coming up there, or we can go to 20 dB of gain and you can see there far too much for the 40 meter band. So let's take it back down to off, and there you can see it cleans it up nicely. So the front end on the 710 is very well designed, very capable, and actually it's quite a quiet receiver. Now when the attenuator or the IPO amplifiers are switched in, it makes a difference. The attenuator reduces the S-meter signal, and of course if you switch the IPO from IPO to amplifier, it increases the S-meter signal. I tend to take signals levels, certainly on the LF bands, with the setting to IPO and the attenuator off, but really and truly it's an arbitrary decision. When you rotate the RF gain control, you'll see the S-meter will go up like that, which is the traditional way, because you're backing off the RF gain. But it doesn't mean to say the signal's stronger, it just means to say that the RF gain is being reduced. And I tend to operate the radio with the RF gain turned back a bit as well, because it gives a better sound. It reduces the background noise. So if you're operating any transceiver actually, make sure that you haven't got more front end gain than you need to. Put a bit of attenuation in, that very often cleans it up, and back off that RF gain because it reduces the background noise. So that's a tip which I would suggest you take on board and try it out for yourself. Let me now demonstrate the digital notch filter. I've tuned to a broadcast station, so I've got a continuous heterodyne. There's the digital notch filter there. Press that, turn it on, and you can hear that the heterodyne has gone completely. Turn it off, you hear the heterodyne come on, so that's a very handy feature. Now, trying to give some idea of noise reduction is not easy, but anyway, I've got a station here on 80 meters, and you can hear the background noise there, and I'll now put the noise reduction circuit in.
I was going to ask you about...
That's with the noise reduction in. You can hear the artifacts, but it does reduce the background noise, and it also helps if you reduce the RF gain control when you use a DNR. Let me take it out now. That's with the noise reduction out.
If you go onto the internet...
That's with the noise reduction in.
Dealers, suppliers... you'll probably get a list of them. They're still available.
So, it's quite effective. In fact, I was quite impressed with that noise reduction button just on the top of the tuning dial on the left hand side. And I was equally impressed with the button on the other side of the tuning dial. The selectivity, wide and narrow, but it's a bit more comprehensive than just wide and narrow. On SSB, we can actually go from 4 kilohertz to 300 hertz. I'm not quite sure why you'd want to go to 300 hertz on SSB, but you can. And on CW you can still go to 4 kilohertz wide, but you can go right down to 50 hertz, more than enough for even the most avid CW DX hunter. Oh, and by the way, it's not only just bandwidth you've got shift, you've got the bandwidth which we've covered, you've got notch, you can put a manual notch in there, and you've also got, would you believe, contour. And also included in that contour filter is an excellent audio pass filter, very narrow filter which you can move around for CW. It's quite amazing, and all this in what we thought was a budget class transceiver. Quite incredible. Let's take a look at the auto ATU capability. Now, I'm using a half-size G5RV, which means to say that hopefully it'll cover all bands from 40 meters to 10 meters. There'll be some high SWRs. Well, actually, it matches my half-size 5RV on all bands. Doesn't mean to say I'm getting a lot of RF radiation, particularly on 15 meters, but let me show you the capability of this ATU, because on 15 meters I've got a very high SWR. No other transceiver would match it. Let's give it a test. Let me show you what the results are. By the way, if you tap the meter you get all sorts of different readings other than VSWR, as you can see here. Here I'll put a bit of carrier in on 15 meters and you can see I've got a very high VSWR. So I press the tune button to trigger the auto ATU, wait for a few seconds, and as you can see, it's matched it, and it will memorise that setting per band. Now, the spectrum display and the waterfall display on the modern HF transceiver is quite an important part of the operation of the transceiver. It's great because we can see parts of the band we're not listening to, which means to say if a signal pops up, we can then tune down to that point and listen to it. Or if it pops up and disappears, the waterfall will have a historic display for say 10, 20 or 30 seconds. It's time for you to just tune down to that channel and wait for the signal to pop up again. So it's quite a handy feature. Now, I found on the FT-710 the spectrum display and the waterfall are very, very sensitive indeed. If I can actually hear the signal, I can see the trace on the screen, so it means that I'm not going to miss anything at all. So let's take a look at the display on the FT-710. There are 3 tuning arrangements. The display remains stationary, or you can set it up so that the signals move behind the cursor, or alternatively the cursor actually tunes across the spectrum, and if you tap on that display anywhere, the transceiver will automatically tune to that signal. There is a 3D display, although I personally preferred the 2-dimension one, and also you can actually bring up an audio display, oscilloscope and so forth there, and you can actually change the colour display as well if you don't like the colour. And if you want to see more of the waterfall, you can press the expand button, expand that, and you can actually change the speed of the waterfall. So it's very flexible. So what do I think of the Yaesu FT-710? Well, I'm very impressed with it. It's difficult to not be impressed with it. And as I said at the outset, this is not a cut down version of the FTX10. It's a new design. It's SDR all the way through. It's a very good performer. When you turn it on, the receiver is quiet. It's very good. Noise reduction is excellent. And the whole layout and the way it works is great. I've operated it on CW. You don't get full break-in, but you do get break-in. I set mine to a delay of around about 400 milliseconds, I think, and that it allows me to have pauses between letters without it going back to receive. For me, that's an ideal way of operating. There is a relay switch there. It's not noisy at all. It seems to work okay. On SSB, it's a delight. You've got plenty of audio gain there. You've got lots to play with. You've got the speech compressor there, which is certainly very effective, and all the reports I got on SSB were very good. They complimented me on the audio quality, so that's very encouraging. The display is excellent, colour display. I find that I do need an external display, but that's because of my eyes actually. Many of you would actually be more than happy with the display on there as it is, and certainly the radio is compact enough for portable operation, and you don't have to have that external speaker plugged in. If you disconnect it, then the radio will function quite happily with the internal speaker, so it's quite a compact unit. And altogether it's difficult to fault the transceiver. Bear in mind it's fourth in line at the top of the Sherwood Engineering list. That's quite remarkable. It eclipses so many more famous transceivers of the past. Go onto the Sherwood Engineering site and have a look for yourself. You'll see some really high performance transceivers. At least they were conceived as high performance transceivers, or perceived as high performance transceivers, but they are knocked out of the running with the Yaesu FT-101 and of course the FT-710. So if you decide to get one, you won't be disappointed, I can promise you that, and I was very impressed with it, and it's a nice package, and I think that Yaesu quite rightly can rest on their laurels with this design. So I hope you found this review that I've done interesting. I've tried to cover all the points that I think are interesting. Have I got any features which I'd like? Well, not really. I think the only thing I'd like is perhaps 2 antenna sockets on the back, but that can easily be covered by a simple coax switch. The display is fine. I like a larger display these days, and that's easily arranged because you've got an external display. That seems to work fine. Anything else? Well, if you compare it with the FTDX10, you can't decode CW and you can't decode RTTY. You can plug a keyboard into this radio, you can plug a mouse into this radio and navigate and control the screen with a mouse. That's quite handy. I've always found that CW decoding on the screen is never totally satisfactory. It does depend on the quality of the sender sending reasonable quality CW. So that's something I miss, and I'm not into RTTY. So they are the things that you might miss, but if these aren't important to you, then the FT-710 is a great buy. As usual, thank you for supporting this channel, much appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I do appreciate your support that you give to this channel and all the comments you make. You come up with some great ideas sometimes and some very useful comments, which of course are shared by others that view the channel. And also thank you for your support on the at the shop at Milton Keynes. We're more than happy to chat to you and do part exchange or whatever. And if you're in striking distance, don't forget we're very close to the M1. If you're in striking distance of Milton Keynes, then take a trip down sometime. We'd be more than happy to see you. In the meantime, you take care, enjoy your ham radio. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.
Because obviously we did Liverpool the only time south to west. So yeah, be my guest, your man. The same thing on the opposite side of the bay. You answer. You forget about half an hour, 3/4 an hour before I have to retire.